Hello and welcome to Beacon of Creation, a weekly podcast on game design through the lens of Magic the Gathering. I'm Juliet.
And I'm Mono White Border, also known as Peter.
And hey, Mono White Border, also known as Peter. What's your favorite flavor?
My favorite flavor would have to be skeletons. The undead spooky tribe, perfect for recording an episode in October, I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is October. What a fun coincidence.
Who could have foreseen it?
We could have read the bones. Or skeletal scrying. Both would be.
There we go. Yeah, we both went for read the bones.
Mm-hmm.
Skeletal scrying is a little outdated, I feel like.
Yeah. Read the Bones was like a relevant constructed card for a little while at least.
Yeah, I'll never forget Patrick Chapin, I think it was like rushing through a play one time and he cast Read the Bones and he scryed two and he put them directly into his hand. So he just picked up two cards, put them into his hand and said, I'm leaving these on top.
Mm-hmm. Reaching back in the past, not just to Theros standard, but all the way back to Magic's beginning, we had skeletons in the original Alpha set, right?
Drudge Skeletons, I think, was the first skeleton card. I don't think there was another skeleton in Alpha. I have a copy of Alpha Drudge Skeletons that was gifted to me by a friend. It's tucked away nicely in the binder.
So there kind of was and kind of wasn't. It didn't become a skeleton until quite a bit later. But in Alpha, we did also have Wall of Bone.
Oh, right on.
One of the very many walls of the early days of Magic. Wall of Bone, of course, being a 2 and a black defender 1/4 with pay a black mana and regenerate this.
Also, not the only skeleton wall in Magic, because you also have Barrier of Bones from Ravnica.
Mm-hmm.
Skeletons have a long history of walling off areas.
And, I mean, that is also one of the real purposes of, like, a Drudge Skeletons, right? Like, you can attack in with it, but... So Drudge Skeletons, of course, is 1 and a black for a 1/1 creature skeleton, frequently common, and its ability is pay a black mana, regenerate Drudge Skeletons. And I think for a long time that becomes like, that is what skeletons mean. Like that is the beginning default and kind of identifies regenerate and identifies skeletons in the kind of locked pair together.
Yeah, it becomes... when you see a skeleton, it is an expectation that that skeleton will regenerate, which kind of essentially turns them for a long time into their 2 mana 1/1s, so worse than a bear, but they can block a bear theoretically forever. Which is, I think, very fitting of like the skeleton idea of like, these guys aren't particularly good at anything, but they're extremely affordable and they don't really ever go away. I think regenerate was the way of like communicating that idea of like the bones all like fall apart and then they come back and put themselves back together, and you maybe have that little like do 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 music that goes over top of it. And
of course, not only was Drudge Skeletons reprinted many times, only a few different arts. Of course, 7th edition, as 7th edition does, came in with a bunch of new arts, and then that persisted for a while, and then we got the kind of modern arts closer to the 10th edition era. But fundamentally exact reprints of Drudge Skeletons under different names was also a thing for a while. We got like Restless Dead, which is the exact same card mechanically with just a different name, art, and flavor text. And I believe Unworthy Dead is also the exact same thing.
Yep. The 1 and a black 1/1 skeleton is like a staple of my skeleton EDH deck. Almost as much of a staple. Like eventually skeletons got pushed up to where you got a 1 mana 0/1 with like a more expensive regenerate, but I think the 2 mana 1 regenerate 1/1 is still the ideal rate for a skeleton. Drudge Skeletons also, we'd be remiss not to mention one of the most infamous misprints in skeleton history for sure, but Magic history as well. There's the German 8th edition Drudge Skeletons, which is the version that I play in Skeleton Tribal. That is literally a swamp. The whole card looks like a swamp, but the text box has the Drudge Skeletons text on it. including
Huh.
flavor text. It's very neat. Maybe we can drop a picture. I'll drop a picture of my copy in the Discord when this episode drops.
Yeah,
And show
that
off the
piece of
bling.
lore is totally new to me. That is kind
Yep.
of exciting. So you could play like one in a black for a rampant growth, but just for swamps?
Yeah, if you're willing to trick your opponents, which many an opponent I've had to like explain that I'm casting Drudge Skeletons, and they're like, why's that land up there? And I'm like, or they think that oh, Peter, you played the wrong card, and I'm like, no, here, take a look, it's a 1/1 skeleton. Yeah, I could do the ultimate Dryad Arbor tech of like keep it in my lands, and then bam, here's a 1/1 to block your thing.
Which is, I think, all things considered, that is a very skeleton thing to do. Is you're going down some dark and creepy corridor, and the skeleton was waiting there all along. The fact that you ran into it, that is scary for you.
Yeah, literally, they made a card for this. They made Spawning Pool, which was one of the original creature lands, came into play tapped, can add 1 black mana. But if you pay 1 and a black, you get a 1/1 Drudge Skeleton, literal Drudge Skeleton, 1 and a black, and then it has black to regenerate it. A Drudge Skeleton that can pay for itself, which is some really neat, like, Spawning Pool is 3 mana, block a creature without flying it for free, basically. You just have to pay the 3 mana.
How important is 1 power versus 0 power on these kind of old-fashioned style of skeletons, on these like regenerating skeletons?
Pretty unimportant. Skeleton Tribal is also the deck that I hand to new players that like want to learn how to play Commander, because the thing that skeletons are good at doing, and new players can pick up on this because new players want to use abilities of creatures, and entrenched Magic players do not pick up on this because it's very unintuitive to them, because they've learned to be mana efficient and you want to just use all your mana in a turn. So new players will like leave up their mana so that they can regenerate their skeleton, so that when the board wipe hits, their skeleton army still sticks around. It's not intimidating, but it's alive. And that's kind of what the whole idea of skeleton deck is. It's a deck that's trying to come in second place. I'm not scary, but I'm alive. Definitely not unalive, but I am undead. And so that helps me stick around and get second place. And if all you had access to was the very early skeletons, the 2 mana 1/1s, you don't really have a lot of threat. You can't really give somebody the business. There's no big bad scary skeleton at the end of the dungeon. It's just a ton of 1/1s.
I think Homelands gave us Drudge Spell, which is 2 black mana for an enchantment that you can then, as an activated ability, pay a black mana and exile 2 creature cards from your graveyard to make effectively a Drudge Skeletons, a 1/1 black skeleton token that spends a black mana to regenerate. And then if somebody destroys the enchantment, you lose all of your skeletons. So just in case you have a bunch of skeletons who have died and you can't bring them back, you can still put their bones together to reassemble more obnoxious, difficult to kill little guys.
Yeah, Drudge Spell has one of the great skeleton arts, generally speaking, of like a skeleton dog, a skeleton fairy dragon, and a headless skeleton horseman with 2 arms coming out the right side as though he's been put together kind of incorrectly. All of it seems to be set in kind of a graveyard setting. Combining Drudge Spell and Coat of Arms was like a predominant win con in skeletons. Of like,
Yeah,
surprise, here's 8, whatever they're going to be, 7/7s.
Yeah. The bones reinforce each other like I never noticed the little fairy dragon. That is very fun. Or tiny little, very small bone Pegasus, possibly. Hard to say on that scale.
What got me into skeletons in Magic the Gathering was the goofiness of a lot of the art. There's some skeletons that take themselves very seriously, and it's like, we are scary even though we're not, but many skeletons don't seem to take themselves seriously at all. It's like a very lax, goofy, we're here for a good time, not a long time kind of stuff. So yeah, Drudge Spell was definitely in that list of skeletons that spoke to me. It's not the skeleton, and we might get to the skeleton that got me involved in the skeleton creature type in Magic a little later on, but definitely one of the goofier arts.
I think also in this kind of mode, in this model, even when we get to the middle era of magic, out of the ancient era into the middle era, stuff like Skeletal Changeling, where it's effectively Drudge Skeletons, 1 and a black for a 1/1 that regenerates, but it costs an extra mana to regenerate, and in return, it's a shapeshifter with changelings, so it is a skeleton, even though it like isn't creature type skeleton. It is skeleton and everything else. It's a lizard wizard brushwag skeleton.
It's a crucial piece if you want to build an all skeletons deck, but you still want to play the Grim Captain's Call, or not the Grim Captain's Call. You still want to play the Grim Captain. To craft it, you need that shapeshifter in there. So Changeling, very relevant to your skeleton EDH decks.
Or just 1 block further in Alara with Skeletonize, which is a 4 and a red instant that lightning bolts a creature, and when a creature dies this way, you create a 1/1 black skeleton creature token with pay a black, regenerate this creature.
Just a big flavor win. Yeah, there's like this middle era of skeletons. They're like, what else can we do with Drudge Skeleton? How can we push Drudge Skeleton, but in like it's kind of weird because like I feel like the power creep of MTG, generally speaking, isn't linear. There's generally like a kind of a big jump. Skeletons feels the most linear, right? Like, okay, look, how do we bump up Drudge Skeletons a little bit? We will give it an ability and make the regenerate cost 1 more to even it out. So you get Manor Skeletons with haste, 1 black regenerate Manor Skeletons. Cinder Bones with wither, and then 1 black regenerate Cinder Bones. Or Skeletal Grimace. You can rip the face off of your creature. And if you do, they get +1/+1 and can be regenerated.
And then I realized we all have skeletons on the inside. Why wait until the bodies are dead to control them?
Of course.
Jadar, Full Color of Nephalia.
And then, of course, Jadar. Doesn't Jadar make a decayed zombie? Like, what the heck? I'm sorry. This is a big sticking point for me, is like there's tons of zombies in Magic that definitely are objectively skeletons and not zombies and should be skeletons. The most glaring example is Ebon's, what is his name? The Draco Lich from the D&D set.
Draco Lich.
Exactly.
Legendary creature zombie dragon instead of a skeletal dragon.
Absolutely no flesh on that skeleton. It is a skeleton and simply a skeleton. I feel like flesh is the delineating force. If you are a majority flesh muscle over bone, then you're a zombie. But if you're majority bone, then you're a skeleton. And he is definitely majority bone.
I think that is an important kind of distinction to make, because in part because we have black mana as one of the, major identity groups for cards across all of Magic. And then we have kind of little undead servants as part of filling out, the common creatures frequently for these things. That being able to distinguish zombies from skeletons has kind of grown to be more and more a thing over time. Of course, part of the reason Jadar makes a zombie is because 2/2 zombie creatures with decayed was like the thing at the time. I think is that Midnight Hunt?
Or, yeah, that would be Midnight Hunt. Crimson Vow also had decayed. I don't remember.
For me, though, after the Drudge Skeletons of, the 7th edition, of Alpha, but for me, 7th edition is my Alpha. So that's that's my point. But a card that kind of reintroduced skeletons into what was at the time modern design space for me was Reassembling Skeleton, which is still 1 and a black for a 1/1 creature skeleton warrior. But instead of regenerating on the battlefield, it has pay 1 and a black mana, return Reassembling Skeleton from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped.
And this is kind of like a natural mechanical evolution that needs to happen because Regenerate starts to go out of vogue. If you have Regenerate, then you have to have these cards that say can't be regenerated attached to them, which then makes Regenerate feel kind of useless.
This is a big thing in the M sets, as we saw Day of Judgment come in to replace Wrath of God, as we saw Murder and Doomblade coming in to replace Terror and things like that. We see the deprecation of both the can't be regenerated and the regenerate swapping out for other things. Can you tell me what set reassembling skeleton was originally printed in.
This is like a fun challenge.
Mm-hmm. Can you think of different numbers or not?
Oh, is it a core set?
I certainly first played it in a core set.
Oh man, because it has a modern border. So would
Mm-hmm.
it be M? When did the modern border come in? M11?
So M11 is a great guess because I mean, for me, it was introduced in M11. I think for many, many players, it was first played in M11. But it actually, before M11 was printed in Arch Enemy, which is just such a wild, weird piece of trivia, I think.
The reassembling skeleton that I used for much of my lifetime was
Mhm.
the dual deck reassembling skeleton. So I think it's been reprinted in multiple dual decks, if I'm looking
Mhm.
at this correctly. So
Yeah,
it's
is it versus
specifically,
Golgari?
yeah,
And
specifically is it versus Golgari, but it was also printed in Soren versus Tybalt.
I mean, speaking of is it versus Golgari, I think this takes us to kind of a next era, which is skeletons were just this one thing for a long time.
Mhm.
And then magic kind of, I don't know, a set and a block breathed new life into magic in multiple ways. And that set is Ravnica City of Guilds,
Mhm.
which introduced the idea that skeletons are a big part of magic and they don't just have to be 1/1s. They can be 1/1s, but they're a lot more than that.
Yeah.
In the first Ravnica block, we have, Dimir Houseguard. It's a 3 and a black, 2/3 creature skeleton common. Fear, sacrifice a creature, regenerate this. This switch away from regenerate. Also, there's transmute, so you can just toss this aside for 3 mana to search up any 4 mana card in your library. And that is the third or fourth strongest skeleton in original Ravnica block
Mhm.
because there's some heavy hitters there.
Yeah, you had oft banned Golgari
Mhm.
Grave Troll, one of the most frequently banned cards in Magic history, possibly.
Uh-huh.
Considering how often it gets unbanned, perhaps the skeleton typing on that card, bringing it down. They're like, there's no way a skeleton can be ruining the modern format.
Yeah, let's just bring it back.
In much the same way, very, very Melvin-y, very Vorthos-y, combining heads there. Of course, this is, once again, you're getting away from the 2 mana aspect. Now, skeletons can cost a variety of mana costs. So, Golgari Grave Troll costs 5. You get a 0/0 that gets a +1/+1 counter for each creature in your graveyard. You can remove a counter to regenerate it. So now we're getting creative regenerate cost. And then
Mhm.
Dredge 6. So you're returning it from your graveyard, much like reassembling skeleton, for the Golgari key mechanic of exiling a bunch of cards from your graveyard.
And Golgari Grave Troll often is said that, listen, this card could be a 0/0 that dies as soon as it enters the battlefield. It's a Dredge 6. That's a big part of why it is so fearsome. But it has also closed out plenty of games in Dredge and Dredge adjacent decks, from the standard of the time to the extended of the time to modern and vintage at different points in time. Another difficult to deal with skeletal threat from the original Ravnica block is Skeletal Vampire, which is 6 mana, 4 black and a black for a 3/3 creature vampire skeleton rare. To me, I think the idea of a skeletal vampire is absurd enough that it becomes interesting.
Mm-hmm.
This is a flying vampire skeleton. When it enters the battlefield, you create 2/1/1 black bats. You can sacrifice a bat to regenerate this. You can also pay 3 black black and sacrifice a bat to put 2 bats. So you can keep replicating the number of bats, and then anytime someone tries to remove this, you just sacrifice one of the bats. And as long as you have enough bats and enough mana and time, you can just keep perpetuating this.
One of the funniest things about playing Skeletal Vampire in a skeleton deck with Coat of Arms as a primary way of making big skeletons is that occasionally you will win via the bat plan.
You just gum up the board and then just, oh, my
Yep,
my 3/3s, my various 3/3s, my various 4/4s and 5/5 bats are gonna be
they're
swinging
gonna
in.
win the day. Now, here's an interesting factoid. You
Mhm,
would think because of skeletons' history as these like kind of foddery creatures that there wouldn't be a lot of rare skeletons before Skeletal Vampire, and Skeletal Vampire would be the first. There were
mhm.
3 rare skeletons before Skeletal Vampire. You're welcome to guess, Juliet. I would be
Mhm.
surprised if you got them.
So I'm wondering, there is the first multicolored skeleton in the first multicolored set of legends, but there were also a bunch of uncommon legends. I actually don't know that much about the rarities situation in
hmm
legends
Yeah.
because I know when they brought it back for Magic Online, they made a bunch of them commons. Like Lady of the Mountain is just a common now.
hmm
Lady of the Mountain is the one. Everybody has like a card from Legends that they like identify with and
Yeah.
associate with.
Right.
Lady of the Mountain is mine. So there's is it Skeleton Ship? Is that the name of
Correct.
the? Do you want to read a Skeleton Ship? I think
Yeah.
that's a fun and relevant one.
Skeleton Ship. This is the card that got me into skeletons. Once again, very goofy art. It's 3 blue black, actually from Ice Age for an
Oh,
O3 skeleton.
oh well.
For an O3 skeleton, when you control no islands, you sacrifice it, and then you can tap it to put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. So you can broadside somebody. It's like my favorite thing in the world is like you get broadsided by the skeleton ship, and you're not destroyed because when you broadside someone in a ship, you usually don't sink them on the first pass. You have to make a couple passes to deal enough damage so they sink in the water. So it takes a couple passes of skeleton ship to take out most creatures.
Of course, I should have known this is an Ice Age card. Its flavor text is the sea gives up her dead as easily as the soil. Limdul, the necromancer.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, Limdul from Cold Snap.
Yeah, Limdul, another necromancer that references referenced on skeleton card that makes zombies. I'll rest my case that Magic doesn't know what they're doing with the skeleton creature type, but
And as we
nonetheless.
always say, I've heard of a skeleton crew, but this is ridiculous. I genuinely can't think of another rare skeleton though that predates Ravnica.
and
There's not a because like Mirrodin,
mhm,
no big like Mephidros skeleton, whatever. There's like the Mephidros vampire, but not a big
mhm.
skeleton thing. The riggers are very skeletal, but not skeletons, as far as I know. Onslaught, Odyssey, I'm like Urborg skeletons. That's that little kicker card. There's
Mhm.
no. I am at a complete loss.
So the last two here, and I can't blame you because they're also from the sets where rarity wasn't denoted by the set symbol, so they
Mhm.
look like commons. And I genuinely thought they were commons, and I own
Uh-huh.
both of these cards. The first ever rare was Carrionet, 1 black for a
Oh.
1/1, and you can pay 2 black. You remove it and target creature from the game. That creature's controller can pay 2 to counter this ability, and you use it only if Carrionet's in your graveyard. So a removal spell from your graveyard that your opponent can opt out of if they have 2 mana free. And then the other one is Skeleton Scavengers, which is 2 black for a 0/0 that comes in with a +1/+1 counter on it, and its regenerate cost is equal to the number of counters on it. And once you regenerate once, you get another counter, and it keeps going. So if you regenerate it 3 times, it then costs 3 to regenerate, and you get to put another counter, and the next time you do it, it costs 4 to regenerate. Just 2 extraordinarily weird cards.
And this plays in okay, I'm going to admit that even I don't have all of the regenerate loopholes and nuances front of mind. I would not
hmm
expect our listener to either. For this, the when it regenerates this way, put a +1/+1 counter on it.
Correct?
That only counts if it would be destroyed and therefore does because when
Yep.
we say regenerate, what it actually is it's applying a regeneration shield.
Yep.
And when that shield is removed and the creature becomes tapped, then it
Yep.
or does the creature is the creature tapped when the shield gets put on or when the shield gets removed?
Oh my god. I know a lot of answers about regenerate, Juliet, and that has never come up. You put the shield on, so
Mhm.
you can pay to regenerate. Like I can pay at the beginning of my turn to regenerate my Drudge Skeletons. It won't tap at that point.
Okay, great.
When it would when lethal damage would be dealt to it, instead, as a replacement effect, I tap the creature, remove it from combat, and remove all damage from it. And then it still deals damage to whatever, was blocking it, if something was
Mhm.
blocking it or something. So yeah, and you are 100% right. Skeleton Scavengers you can't pay a bunch of mana into to get a bunch of +1/+1 counters on it. You get the one. And you can add multiple regenerative shields. So if you think Skeleton Scavengers is going to die 5 times in a turn, I think you can pay one a
pay them
bunch
in advance.
and then, get a bunch of regenerative shields and then get a counter.
All of the judges listening, chime in whether you can have multiple regeneration shields or whether they all, thankfully something that doesn't come up very often unless I suppose you're handing a new player a skeletons deck. But so we've seen skeletons showing up in Golgari, then we've seen skeletons showing up as just kind of creepy and around in Ravnica. We also have skeletons in like named Dimir and in Dimir colors, and skeletons in Rakdos also. With both like black and red cards or mono black skeletons like Grim Roustabout. That's another 1 and a black for a 1/1 creature skeleton warrior with pay 1 and a black to regenerate Grim Roustabout. But this time the ability really matters. And the ability here is Unleash. So this is either a 2/2 that can't block or it's a traditional 1/1 that you are spending an extra mana on the regenerate.
And regenerate a much better defensive mechanic, because if your opponent just doesn't block it, then the regenerate's kind of useless. Grim Roustabout does not make sense to me as a design of like, a 2-mana 2/2 that can't block with regenerate, just not the best thing in the world. I guess from the standpoint of like, we don't want to gum up the board in limited formats, maybe this is actually thoughtful use of regenerate on a creature, but you can still use it defensively if you just make it a 1/1. So very strange card.
We also have, cards like Gutter Bones, which I think is pioneering in the space of 1 mana 2/1 skeletons. That's a like ETB enter the battlefield tapped, as we frequently see on 1 black mana 2/1s. And this one for Gutter Bones, you can return it from your graveyard to your hand if your opponent has lost life this turn. So instead of like a Gravecaller having a zombie, it's, we need to have constantly be dealing damage to your opponents or having them have, I guess, not pain lands because it's only on your turn. That's fascinating.
Yep. I think Gutter Bones was another standard role player as just like a aggressive 2/1 is pretty good in standard, and if you can get it back occasionally, then that kind of usually pushes it over the top to where people actually include it in their deck.
It's a beautiful looking card. The aesthetics of the card work really well together. And it's like, that's playable. This is interesting. I also want to shout out Rot Farm Skeleton, which is a 2 black and a green 4/1 uncommon creature plant skeleton from Dragon's Maze. Rot Farm Skeleton can't block, and that's important because its other ability is 2 black and a green. Put the top 4 cards of your library into your graveyard. Return Rot Farm Skeleton from your graveyard to the battlefield. And so it is they said, listen, we're not ever printing any more Dredge cards, but you can have a little Dredge, unkeyworded, spending a bunch of mana for it as a treat.
It's funny, it can't block, but it's also activate only as a sorcery, so they really did not want this coming back and blocking on your opponent's turn like a surprise blocker. They wanted to avoid that at all costs.
Like spending 4 mana. I think part of the idea is that, listen, a 4/1 that you can just keep regenerating each turn is like a really frustrating blocker compared to a 1/1 because it'll like eat a creature each time, maybe. And then fast forwarding all the way to the present, in Murders of Karlov Manor, we have a new addition to the Hunted cycle with Hunted Bone Brute, 2 and a black for a rare creature skeleton beast. It's a 6/2 with menace. When it enters the battlefield, your opponent creates 2 1/1 white dog creatures. And when Hunted Bone Brute dies, each opponent loses 3 life, and of course has Disguise for 1 and black mana. So you can kind of morph it in there to avoid the Hunted bonus to your opponents.
I think we've kind of reached the state of Magic design where skeletons have like a pseudo spot in the set skeleton, if you will, where almost every set there is skeleton with set mechanic, and usually that skeleton somehow is a hard to kill threat with set mechanic. Like I instantly think of Deathless Knight. That's 4 hybrid black green for a 4/2 haste, and when you gain life the first time, it comes back to your hand. That's another like common delineation between skeletons and zombies, is there's a lot of skeletons that come to your hand and then you have to recast them. versus going directly to the battlefield. Though there's also plenty that come directly to the battlefield as well. Finding that niche, that little difference between zombies and skeletons, is always something that Magic's going to have to fight with a little bit.
Ian, I'm a little surprised to see Hunted Bone Brute. I mean, it's a really big creature, so it's whatever. But see that 2 toughness? Because it seems like often, but not always, one of the differences between skeleton and zombie is 1 toughness versus 2 toughness.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about how for a long time, Magic would just do, here's a creature, but it's a skeleton version, so it has 1 toughness, like your various skeletal snake for a 2/1 for 1 and a black, or skeletal crocodile, it's a 5/1 for 3 and a black.
Yeah, the idea being that, like, once you remove the flesh and muscle, skeletons are pretty fragile. You know, skeletons are the enemy in, like, a video game that, like, they're one hit and they disintegrate. There's usually just a lot of them. They're like an important enemy in, like, your D&D campaigns, where you want some enemies that just kind of, like, disintegrate when the heroes hit them once, so that the heroes feel powerful and there's stuff constantly changing on the battlefield and it doesn't turn into a slog. Once again, they're still in that, like, cannon fodder world of creature type. Like, when we make a skeleton, generally speaking, they are a fragile thing.
And speaking of video game opponents, speaking of little monsters that you'd fight in a video game, kind of moving into another new world of skeleton design is Skeleton Archer, which is a 3/3 for 3 and a black creature skeleton archer. It's a common. When Skeleton Archer enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to any target.
Was this explicitly called out as, like, this is a Minecraft reference that we're making in Magic the Gathering? Is that what the intention was? Or is it just general pingy skeleton creatures in video games?
As far as I know, this is explicitly we are trying to do more references to things to see if that we're doing market research, and it's telling us both that long titles are good, but also we are we are trying to see whether, okay, doing things in this mode, doing the, like, plants that have protection from zombies and stuff, things in that space can be accessible touchstones. When I first saw Skeleton Archer, I was like, I don't get it. It's like, it's fine, but what is this doing for us skeleton-wise, coming off of, like, reassembling skeletons and things like that. And then it's like, oh, Minecraft. Of course. Skeleton archers are a huge part of the Minecraft experience. And so, sure, as part of incorporating that part of popular culture into skeletons are made, like, obviously skeletons are real. Skeletons as a living thing are made up. And so as pop culture adds new things to the corpus of skeletonhood, that can then be reflected in other, like, fantasy pop culture that's going to incorporate those ideas.
I think one thing that they did well with Skeleton Archer in bringing it into the fold of skeleton, like the skeleton archetype in Magic the Gathering, is when they printed it, they also, alongside Skeleton Archer, reprinted Death Baron, which is for a long time was the only skeleton lord. And ironically, and continuing in perpetuity, a lot of skeleton lords aren't skeletons. Like, skeletons don't end up with a leader. Like, when you are in the skeleton army, you are all just skeletons alongside your skeleton brethren. There's, like, a tiefling now that pumps your skeletons. You have Death Baron. There's skeletal swarming that pumps your skeletons if you have other skeletons. And Corpse of the Lost is an enchantment that pumps your skeletons. There's no leader. Your skeletons just get stronger from either outside sources or because all your friends are together with you. So that is one way that Skeleton Archer, if they had just printed Skeleton Archer in the set by itself, I think fire alarms would have been going off of, this isn't a skeleton at all. It has nothing to do with skeletons. This could be anything. And that's one of the things that zombies do currently in Magic the Gathering, is zombies are just kind of like, here is the archetypal black creature that will just kind of do anything and people will be cool with it. Like, if this is a zombie archer, I don't think anyone has any questions just because there's so many zombies. But being a skeleton archer, there is almost an expectation of there needs to be some weird reason this is a skeleton.
Kind of tying to the idea of a skeleton leader. Unfortunately, none of these cards are going to be like super play me with a bunch of skeletons and I'll pump them all with a classic Lord +1/+1. But we have skeletons who are kind of characters in their own right.
Mm-hmm.
So Skeleton Ship is a legend, but it also isn't at the same time. You know what I mean? Like it seems kind of weird that way. But thinking about like Skithiryx from Scars of Mirrodin block, the really scary dragon skeleton infect flyer.
Mm-hmm.
Or thinking about like Tiny Bones in both Tiny Bones' original card and then in Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Or to me, I think Emperor of Bones in Modern Horizons 3 is a big thing in that space. Or the Grim Captain in Lost Caverns of Ixalan.
There is this like new movement in recent Magic the Gathering of we can make something scary and skeletal, which I feel like wasn't happening for a long time. Like, especially as you go back, like the things that were skeletons just weren't even that particularly scary. Like Skeletal Vampire is a 6-mana 3/3. The Skeleton Vampire is not the scary part. Usually they are a common or an uncommon. And now we're starting to see skeletons consistently at higher rarities, and higher rarities demand that you do something interesting, which skeletons for a long time weren't known for. Don't get me wrong, I love regeneration. Like I love regenerating my creatures and I like the weird shenanigans that go into that. But yeah, we've definitely seen a huge influx in just like we're going to have skeletons that do cool and interesting things and maybe is outside the normal sphere of what you might expect from your skeleton creature. I mean, Tiny Bones is like the first legendary skeleton since Skithiryx, I think. And before then it was Skeleton Ship. No, because we also have Bladewing. I think I'm just completely wrong there. But Tiny Bones was a big deal. It's like this is just a skeleton that's coming out.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 2-mana skeleton, which is very in vogue with like the Drudge Skeleton idea. But Tiny Bones themselves does not really have anything to do with skeletons. Like they synergize with Augur of Bones, which is a 2-mana skeleton that you can sacrifice on your upkeep to make somebody discard 2 cards. Like they themselves are not a skeleton leader, at all. It's like you said, they just kind of do their own thing. And that thing usually is interesting. They try and make it neat.
Yeah, I think Tiny Bones might be one of the first legendary skeletons their thing is being a skeleton, even if their thing mechanically isn't. But like rather than a skeleton dragon, this is a skeleton rogue. Like if that makes sense, like skeleton is the main attraction rather than just like a modifier to something like Bladewing being a dragon or Skithiryx being a dragon or Skeleton Ship being a crew, presumably. Although the ship itself, the way it's drawn, that could be also made of like bones and big teeth, maybe? Hard to say.
This was before the traditional, like, was Skeleton Ship, did they request the flying skeletons on sea turtles, or did the artist decide that they wanted skeletons on, like, were they inspired? It's just a baffling card, and I love it.
And then in the most recent set, as of this recording, Duskmourn House of Horrors, we have another weird foray in skeletonhood in the form of Scrabbling Skull Crab, which is a single blue mana for a 0/3 creature crab skeleton, and Skullsap Nuisance, which is a blue and a black 1/4 creature insect skeleton with flying. They both have eerie abilities, so whenever an enchantment you control enters or you fully unlock a room, you either mill 2 cards or surveil 1 respectively as uncommons. And
Which
I have to ask, are these skeletons?
I think what makes them skeletons is kind of leaning into what I mentioned previously, where skeletons are now just becoming like, this thing is spooky. And eerie is a spooky flavor. Like, it's an ability word that is supposed to be spooky. If that is the future of skeletons, like not so much a mechanical identity, but a flavorful identity of they are spooky, I am deeply saddened at the state of skeletons in the near future. But I am willing to give them, this is a bend, not a break for me in terms of the skeleton pie. I will allow it on the strength of eerie as a word, but I don't want to see it again in the future. I'd like some regeneration or variant of on these skeletons.
Well, I also have to ask, because neither of these things are vertebrates.
You know what? I don't think skeletons should be isolated to just things with bones. We are in a world of magic. I can add bones to anything.
Okay, here's another question. Slitherhead, a classic black to green hybrid for a 1/1 creature plant zombie common with scavenge 0. So you can exile it from your graveyard to put a +1/+1 counter on something. Slitherhead is a weird little fungus moss plant
Yep.
thing with tentacles and whatever walking along that has a skull. It's like a hermit crab using a skull as its shell that it has found. It didn't grow that skull. Is that a skeleton?
It should be a skeleton. Slitherhead
Okay.
firmly believes Slitherhead should be a skeleton. I think plant zombies are particularly
Bad at
problematic.
being, yeah.
I think there's quite a few plant zombies that it's like, this is really just a skeleton.
Sure, Vulturous zombie looks a lot
Yep.
like a skeleton. Shambling Shell, yeah, that looks like a plant skeleton.
Mhm.
Woodwraith Strangler, that's another, like, very clearly a skeleton kind of being covered by vines and moss.
Mhm.
Huh. Really makes you think.
So we have plant skeletons already. There's no reason that we couldn't have more plant skeletons. I don't know why these were made into zombies. There's not a zombie themes in these sets traditionally. And even like Eldritch Horror Innistrad, normally a set with zombies and a zombie theme, is a plant skeleton. So I don't know what the issue is over there at Wizards of the Coast. I'd love to hear. I'd love to learn more about what you're determining when you make these flavor decisions. I just want to talk, you know?
Maybe we'll have, instead of a grand unified creature update, we'll have a grand undead creature update.
Yeah, please.
Something like that. Thinking about Modern Horizons skeletons very briefly, your feelings and thoughts on two very splashy cards, I would say. Lightning Skelemental, which is a black, red, and red for a rare 6/1 creature elemental skeleton. Trample Haste. It's a ball lightning, so you sacrifice it at the end of the turn, and it lightnings the opponent. It makes them discard 2 cards when it hits them. Or Emperor of Bones, which is a complicated 1 and a black 2/2 that can reanimate some stuff in a funky way.
First off, big fan of Lightning Skelemental. I think the name's a home run. It matches the goofy energy that I appreciate and look for in my skeleton creatures. So that's a strange home run. It has no mechanical skeleton energy, but the flavor energy is very skeleton-y, and I appreciate that. Emperor of Bones is tougher because, like, Emperor of Bones itself does not come back at all. It is the Necromancer in this situation. It's a very cool card. I was excited that the card was printed and it came out, but it is still in that movement away from, like, we're losing the skeleton identity in favor of just having some cool skeletons. And that balancing act for the, like, there are dozens of us, dozens community that is skeleton EDH players, you know, we'd love some continuity, not just power creep. You need the continuity with the power creep.
And then last but not least, thinking about the AFR and Adventures of Forgotten Realms and Battle for Baldur's Gate kind of induction into skeletons. We talked about skeletal swarming earlier as a enchantment that really buffs up skeletons and does kind of a mini coat of arms in its own way there. But we also have Demilichs, which is a creature skeleton wizard. How do you feel about this is a skull with magic? Is that a skeleton or is that something else?
Look, I think that if there is bone, then it is a skeleton. I'm happy to incorporate Demilichs into the skeleton community. And Demilichs has the bonus of, like, it does have, like, a mechanical connection to skeletons. It is coming back from the graveyard. It's kind of neat that it's an instant and sorcery skeleton, so you're making it cheaper if you're casting instants and sorceries, which is something that is not something I do a whole lot when I'm playing a skeleton deck, but I've gotten a Demilichs for, like, 2 mana before. It was pretty crazy. And Demilichs is the kind of execution that I'd want to see, is like, this card is expanding a little bit more on what skeletons can do. It has a flavor tie into the set, and then it is still feels like a skeleton card in some ways.
So if part of what it takes to be a skeleton is having bones there, should Batterskull be a skeleton?
Ooh. Look, I'm all for taking existing cards that are powerful and making them skeletons. Batterskull is interesting. Should we include anything with an exoskeleton in the skeleton club? Our insect skeletons. Should we errata that completely?
Okay, and then my secondary question is Spine of Ish-Sa a skeleton. Do you play Spine of Ishsaw in your
No, but I
in your
should.
skeleton?
I definitely should. That'd be sick.
7 generic mana for destroy target permanent. It's an artifact. It ETBs destroys target permanent. Doesn't do anything. But when it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield, it gets returned to the hand. That honestly, we could just have that as a skeleton ability. I think this fits perfectly as a skeleton.
Yeah, it is. Mortar Strider does that.
Oh, right.
Returns upon, yeah. It is. Man, you learn something new every day. How have I not put Spine of Ishsaw in my skeleton deck?
Mm-hmm.
It's just right there, and I love including cards that are just references to bone. So like Skull Clamp in the skeleton deck, which then you're clamping your Drudge Skeleton and killing your 1/1 with a Skull Clamp. It's very on theme. I've never had anyone complain about the Skull Clamp that's in the deck. So Spine of Ishsaw would be a great. I feel like whoever's permanent you destroy, they're going to be honored when they get destroyed by the Spine of Ishsaw.
Mm-hmm. So we've talked a lot about these skeletons that have existed and things that we might want to see. Now's the time where we design a skeleton card for the future of skeletonness.
What are things that I like in a skeleton? Thinking one of the things you actually put here in the document, which I really do love, is the 1 toughness as a sign of skeletonness. Like just very easy to just mow down.
Mm-hmm.
And then pairing that, there has to be some sort of regenerate alike, whether that is returning to hand, whether that's returning to the battlefield. I like there has to be something that makes it a quote unquote reassembling skeleton. That's definitely a requirement.
We didn't mention it, but there is a single white-black skeleton to go along with all of the various blue-black, green-black, and red-black skeletons. It's Sentry of the Underworld from Theros, a card that looks like a green-black card.
Yep.
I'm a little surprised that there isn't more in terms of white-black skeletons, given that they're a typically black creature type that are typically made of white bones.
That seems like a fun thing to explore. Let's explore what the white-black skeleton would look like in this world. I like that. So we got maybe the cost being white-black, and we make it a 1/1. So we get the Drudge Skeleton feel right away.
Does it have something white connected to its bringing it back?
And that's
ability?
what I was thinking of exiling cards from a graveyard maybe to bring it back.
Oh, from other people's graveyards, potentially. Like this is a graveyard monitor sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Something that it could be like a Guardian of the Underworld style card, keeping things dead. We're getting very Theros-y vibes right away.
I'm thinking, what if we made a white-black scavenging ooze sort of thing?
Yeah.
Like we're exiling a card from another player's graveyard, gain 1 life. Is this in the graveyard when this happens?
Yeah. Let's put it in the graveyard, and then you return it to hand. So you get 1 exile, maybe for a black mana, so we can get the Drudge Skeleton feel.
Return this from your graveyard to what zone should it go to?
What if so we could, if we do it to the battlefield, that makes a lot of sense. And then we can just have an easy 1/1. Or if we want to pay homage to some of our friendly skeletons coming in with counters, it could ETB or enter the battlefield with a counter for each creature card in exile. So it slowly grows, and it's similar to what Scavenging Ooze does. As the more it dies, the more it exiles, the bigger it gets.
Of course, is this just all creature cards in exile, period? Because it can't count its own exiles from previous trips.
Yeah, I guess it would have to be everything. Is that too juiced?
Does that enhance its skeleton identity, or does that detract from its skeleton identity? Are we getting closer to skeletal scavengers, or are we doubling too close to scavenging ooze? I don't know. I'm always thinking about Bridge from Below and doing really weird conditional things based on graveyards. What's something spicy? Or I guess another thing is, if this card was representing, what's the next era for skeletons?
So we have Tiny Bones and Emperor Bones. These are skeletons coming at 2 mana and having some splashy, intense effects, but they're kind of missing that skeleton flavor to them. So having a 2 mana creature, a skeleton creature that comes in and does something kind of instantly rarefied or intimidating, is pretty interesting. Whether that's just like a curve beater, I'm open to, or whether that's something that's a little bit more hoopy. I feel like skeletons do have some hoopiness to them that I'm kind of interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that could be the exiling is the hoopiness, and so we need to key in off the exiling. Or maybe it could be the more it enters, so the more you're exiling, the more you're returning it, the scarier that thing that it does has gotten.
Okay, so enters the battlefield, does something.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we are returning this to your hand, then we can limit lock the ETB based on the fact that you are spending both white and black for this enter the battlefield. I mean, okay. On the other side, what if this is it unskeleton-y for the card to basically never be on the battlefield? And for always, I'm thinking like your various white dragons that we could do like a thing where this is skeleton cycling, and then you can bring it back to your hand and then keep skeleton cycling.
You're playing to my eternal dragon loving heart, Juliet. It's not fair.
So skeleton cycling. What's a good cost for tutor a skeleton into your hand? Assuming that you're going to be able to do this more than once.
We could make it 1 black if we want to honor the Drudge Skeleton.
Is 1 colorless white and black? Is that 2? 1 generic white and black? Is that too expensive for? So I'm thinking like wizard cycling and sliver cycling, but like is skeleton cycling weak enough that we can discount this?
If it was 3 generic mana, I'd be open to that. For some reason, we're looking at like something that we really want to cost 2.5, I think.
Sure. Okay.
3 generic mana feels in that space.
Here's where we're at so far. Creature skeleton. We could add an extra type or super type or subtype to that. 1/1. Skeleton cycling for 3 generic mana. White black hybrid, exile a card from another player's graveyard. Gain 1 life. Is that weird as a cost? We should put that in the.
Yeah, probably a little strange cost.
White and a black hybrid mana. Exile target card in another player's graveyard. Return this from your graveyard to your hand. So basically, you can each turn spend 4 mana to search up a skeleton. So this is a card advantage engine and a graveyard targeter. Is this too spicy? Are we into too rigorous? Should this be its own like commander? Should this be a legendary creature? So this
that's kind of interesting. I'm wondering if maybe
should it be Wooburg so that you can. You're never going to cast it for the Wooburg cost?
Okay, hold on. Now we're cooking. Wooburg Skeleton for the EDH deck. I wanted to, so here's the flavor I'm thinking of trying to express is the idea of like, you remember the meme when you die, if they don't put rest in peace on your tombstone, you become a part of the skeleton army. Can we reference that as like, this skeleton is the equal of its I don't want the skeleton to feel superior, like it is the one raising everyone from the dead. It's just like the recruiter.
Okay, here's my current bit. We could futz it up with a weird hybrid cost to get an extra color in. But here's where I'm at right now. Skeletal recruiter, white mana, black mana for cost. Creature skeleton, could be creature skeleton soldier, skeleton cycling 3, and then white black hybrid, exile target card from another player's graveyard. Return this from your graveyard to your hand. Gain 1 life for a 1/1.
Okay, here's slight variation on this pitch. We can make it an ode back to the recruiter card type of like Dwarven recruiter, recruiter of the guard, or not recruiter of the guard. Dwarven recruiter, and then there's a knight version as well, where they cost a certain amount of mana, and then on enters the battlefield, they look at the top X. Dwarven recruiter shuffles and puts them on top.
Yeah, so does Goblin Recruiter. So
Goblin Recruiter shuffles and puts them on top. Enlistment Officer is the white one. What if we put them in the graveyard?
Okay.
What if we enters search for N number of skeletons, like, I don't know, a number that feels good, maybe 4, and they go into the graveyard? That's pretty juicy. I like that.
Is it more fun if it's limited, or is it more fun if it's unlimited?
Oh, any number? Any number is very fun.
Limited, because then like casting this more than once matters.
Yeah.
Rather than
Yeah. What feels like a good number?
Do you sacrifice this, or is the idea that you're like skeletal recruiter and you're recruiting multiple other skeletal recruiters that can then go in your graveyard, and then so you cast this once on the battlefield, you put 3 of them into the graveyard, and you can like beep beep beep. I'm removing cards from other people's graveyards. Interesting.
My bad card loving heart wants it to be an enters the battlefield, and you have no way of naturally putting this into your graveyard. Like, there's no sacrifice clause on this card. There's no cycling or anything like that. It's just this ETBs, and then you're looking to block.
That is fun. Alternatively, when this enters, you may sacrifice this. If you do. And so it's like, oh yeah, it's going to it's playing the drums, like leading the bandwagon into the graveyard.
All right, I'm into it. I'm into it for the goofy art. I want art description. The art description has to be like skeleton banging the drums to the grave or whatever.
This could be a squadron hawk, so it's just finding other copies of itself. How do you feel about that? Is it more fun to squadron hawk, or is it more fun to search and tutor up your other skeletons, put them in the graveyard?
Yeah, I like the toolboxy element, especially because if you go get another one of these, then you play it, you can only get 2 more, you know? So like if we get 3 of these, then we're eventually going to search some other different creative skeletons.
So Skeletal Recruiter for a white mana and a black mana. It's a creature skeleton soldier bard. It's playing the drums. When Skeletal Recruiter enters, you may sacrifice it. If you do, search your library for up to 3 skeleton cards and put them into your graveyard. And then white-black hybrid, exile target card from another player's graveyard, return this from your graveyard to your hand, gain 1 life. And it's a 1/1.
Yeah, awesome.
We'll add white border.
Thank you.
So that was a fun design challenge to do together. Do we have another design challenge for the month of October?
Ooh, very nice of you to ask, Juliet, because we do. We have our October monthly challenge, Going Ghost. Design a card that flickers itself or something else, but doesn't return its target in the same turn. And our bonus points for this month, always optional, but always fun. Halloween Spirit, make it flicker spirits, be a spirit, or care about spirits. And then Spirit Halloween, make it a cheap knockoff of another card. Think like cheap costumes. So Spirit Halloween is a chain that basically comes to town in the month of October in a lot of US cities. And you can't get Mario, but you can get Heroic Plumber Rescuing Princess as the costume or something. So think that it's kind of like
red overalls, man.
Yeah. It is hinting at this other thing. Everyone knows what it is, but no one can say what it is.
So that's our podcast for this week. You can join our Discord with the link in the show notes. I see your Mdub movie recommendation. I don't know if you've been watching any black and white movies.
So what's really funny is we've been doing zombie movies this month. And I'm like, is it appropriate for me to recommend a zombie movie at the end of this episode? So we have been watching Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, 28 Days Later. I would highly recommend checking out George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, etc. movie franchise. There was one made in 68, one made in the 70s, and one made in the 80s. They're all kind of interesting time capsules for what the philosophy behind movie making was in those decades. And so each of them offers something kind of very unique to the series and the genre at large. So if you're a really big movie buff, you can do that. If you're not, there are some really fun movies. And you're obviously going to want some popcorn. So if you don't have any popcorn at home, you can actually head into the Discord and go to the popcorn channel and contribute there. And there's plenty of popcorn to go around.
So true. And speaking of movies with a similar title, this month over on the Moonshot Network, we are talking about Death on the Nile, the 1978 Poirot murder movie with Dame Maggie Smith and Angela Lansbury and Mia Farrow, and a very talented cast. Less scary than Night of the Living Dead, just suspenseful in a different way. Thanks for listening, and always remember,
don't give your money to wizards.
Don't give them your bones.
Don't give them your bones. The bones are their dollars.
That was also the night that the skeletons came to life.